Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. A big thank you to Sierra for joining us. Uh, I have the smallest bio on you, Sierra, that I will read, but then you will have to expand because it frankly doesn't tell us very much about you. Sierra Greer grew up in Minnesota before attending Williams College and Johns Hopkins University. Her novel, Annie Bot, is the winner of the 2025 Arthur C. Clarke Award for the Best Science Fiction Novel published in the United Kingdom. A former high school English teacher, she writes about the future from her home in rural Connecticut.
That's the truth. And first of all, let me say thank you so much. I'm so delighted to be here with you. I was so thrilled when you invited me to come and do this with you. And when you picked my novel, I was just over the moon. So thank you so much. This is great.
Well, I logged onto your website this morning. Sorry, I'm in a different time zone, as you can see. I'm in Indonesia, so it is morning for me. But when I logged onto your website, there was like a whole list of places that had chosen your book, but it came out in 2024. So
Mhm.
um, I'm sure like now we are 2 years later on, so it's probably always nice to have something new happening with it.
I agree. It's really a thrill to have something new. I really, I expected things would sort of taper off, and I've been delighted that people keep finding my book. So yeah, I feel really fortunate.
So tell us more about your life and how you got into this because you've only written one book. This is your debut novel.
Well, that's actually a good story about that because it is my debut novel for adult science fiction. That is absolutely the case. But I have written young adult novels in the past and other works. And so when my editors suggested that they were going to call it a debut, I was like, is that really the honest thing to do? And they're like, yeah, this is absolutely the convention. When you start in a new genre, you just go ahead. And the other thing that was important to me is that as the writer of young adult novels, I knew I had a following among teenagers, and many of them have grown up, they're older, and my novels all also crossed over to an adult readership. But I just respect my readers so much, and I didn't want to have any chance of confusion or distraction by saying, oh, is this the book by that young adult author? Because it seems a little bit not young adult. So we all agreed the thing to do was just start fresh. Didn't matter if I didn't follow, have any followers or people to carry over at all. We just started fresh. So that's why it looks like I've never written anything before.
If we wanted to find your young adult novels, then what are the titles of those?
That's those are by Cara O'Brien, which is my normal name, and the first series is the Birthmarked trilogy, and then there's the Vault of Dreamers trilogy. So yeah, those are kind of fun too, and they have sort of a feminist slant to them, and they're futuristic as well. So I was carrying through on some of the ideas and concerns that I have.
Amazing. So that changes the landscape considerably then. This isn't your first novel, and you've already kind of entered into the I mean, we won't say that Annie Bot is fantasy, but you've already entered into a realm of like sort of magical realism
Yeah,
previously.
I think of it as, yeah, I've definitely been in the science fiction futuristic kind of space before. And I like the term speculative because it sort of implies that we're speculating about the future or thinking about the future. When I think science fiction, I tend to go right to thinking of Star Wars or Dune, different planets and international intrigue and planetary warfare. But actually, books like Margaret Atwood's The Handmaid's Tale is science fiction too. It's just under the speculative fiction sort of area where
Yeah.
we're just like peeking into the future a little bit. And that's the place that really, really interests me.
So you're no longer a teacher. You don't teach anymore?
And no, I actually did meet up with one of my former students today, though. We got together. So I'm in touch with some of my former students, but I had to give up teaching in order to write full time. So I'm not in the classroom anymore.
And those first books you wrote, were those for your audience? Like you were writing for the audience that you were teaching at the time?
That's exactly what happened. I was reading we were reading, did a lot of independent reading in my class because I'm a big proponent of supporting people reading what they choose to read. And a lot of my students were reading Twilight, and they're like, "Oh, you've got to read this book." So I read it, and I was like, "This is amazing! What an incredible book!" And I just loved how playful it was, and just you could tell the author had just a great time writing that whole series of novels. And I was like, "Yeah, this seems like fun. I'm gonna, try to do this." So yeah, I had teenagers in my classrooms, and I had teenage children of my own at the time as well. So that's what I did.
All right, let's bring the audience in a little bit here. Please, if you don't mind putting into the chat window where you're calling in from so that we have an idea of where everybody is based. And also, if you do have any questions for Sierra during the interview, please feel free to ask them in the chat. You can also ask them live by putting up your hand. There's a raise my hand functionality. We always love to have live participation, so that is absolutely an option for everybody. And we're going to have people from all over. We have Kingston, Knoxville, Vancouver so far, Tulsa, Oklahoma, Ottawa, Canada, Waterloo, New York, Queens, Toronto, Winnipeg, Ottawa. So just to give you, sometimes we go global, but here we are in North America. That'll be the time zone. All right. So I have
That's really amazing. I have to say, it's really so cool that we can do all of this.
So I do have so many questions for you. Some of them have been emailed in to me. Some of them have been asked for. Oh, there you go, Melbourne, Australia. Thanks, Lydia. Um, some have been asked through social media. We had, I think people, and this happens often actually with science fiction because science fiction isn't necessarily our go-to genre for the gloss. When we do our year-end census on everybody, science fiction is always much lower than historical fiction or psychological thriller. But I have to say, what usually happens with a really good science fiction, which Annie Bot is absolutely that, is that people are so surprised by how much they enjoy it. And I
Hmm.
think that this book, like Dark Matter, Blake Crouch, has converted people to be like, wow, maybe this is a genre I need to explore further. So we thank you for that.
Well, thanks for giving it a chance. Yeah,
Yeah,
I think it does kind of push boundaries for what people expect, but I think the genre is evolving and changing all the time. When I think about the different books that were nominated for the Arthur C. Clarke Award, there were some really personal and sort of private domain novels that were there, very, I think of as experimental. So it's cool to see what people are doing, what they're playing with in this genre.
absolutely. Now, I'd love to talk about the timing of this book because generative AI, the one like Claude and everything, it hadn't, when you were writing this, this hadn't been released yet. So, I mean, the
No.
timing is kind of crazy. Can
It's
you speak to
really
that?
Yeah, it really it kind of blows my mind because the chances of something of the timing working out like that for a novel are so low. I mean, you never know what's going to happen in technology. You never can predict what's going to be happening 2 years from when you sign a contract for a book, let alone the 2 years before that when you write it. So I started working on Annie Bot during the pandemic, if you can
Wow.
imagine what we were all doing back then, which I think kind of lends itself to the claustrophobic feeling of what it's like in that apartment with Annie and Doug. It's like they were trapped in there, and I was writing in a place where I felt like my life was very confined. It was very much, it was very tight in. And I had been just generally aware of what was going on with artificial intelligence because back in 2018, Google Brain had invented a system where it taught itself a third language by going through a second. I can't remember if it was trying to learn Spanish and it used Italian to teach it to learn Spanish, but something like that. And nobody had programmed it to do that. It thought up a method for how to teach itself a language on its own. And that was the first time that I started thinking, oh wow, something really different is out there. If this kind of thinking can be creative and solve problems on its own, what could happen next? And so I was aware of that, but I had no idea that AI was just about to be just like taking over our whole lives. And as you say, ChatGPT wasn't even out. So in a way, it's good. I think if I had tried to write a novel based on what was truly going on or what was about to happen with AI, it would already be dated. I would have already written something that was actually mired in the truth of that time. And instead, I was more interested in the relationship between Annie and Bot. That's really what drove me into this. And so I wasn't held back or restricted by research into what was going on with AI at the time. I just let my mind go. So that's how I got into it.
Yeah, you're not wrong at all. I mean, it's good. It moves so quickly that, and the publishing industry unfortunately does not move as quickly.
It can't really. It takes a long time to do something carefully. So even though I sold the book in April of 2022, it didn't come out until 2024. And that's just sort of the timeline of how things were going. So
Okay, so let's dive a little bit deeper into the actual story. So Annie Bot centers on this cuddle bunny companion robot designed to serve a man's every desire. So like that initial seed of the sort of like cuddle bunny, where did that come from and how did it evolve as you wrote?
It's almost difficult for me to remember because it was a while ago, and also because the question suggests that I knew what I was doing from the very beginning. And I don't write that way. I'm a very organic writer, and I start on page one with the characters, and I discover the story with them while I keep writing it, scene by scene by scene. So I realized right away that she was a cuddle bunny. And I did make that choice because I knew it would be challenging and really intimate. I knew because I know when characters are in an intimate physical relationship, when they're having sex all the time, that can really reflect the power dynamics between people, and it can show a possibility for emotional growth of a relationship between the two people too. So I knew it would be very charged if she was, a sexual being, and in this case, the cuddle bunny. So that was really a pivotal decision from the get-go. But then I didn't know how it was going to play out at all. I didn't even know in the first chapter she was going to end up, having sex with Roland. I can just go ahead and be frank, right? Because
Yeah, yeah,
everyone's
everybody's read it.
read this, and we're all adults and everything. Yeah, so I sort of, I wrote that first chapter, and then after I was revising the book, I was like, well, what does this really mean? Did she permit herself? Did she invite this? What was really going on? And for me, it was really important that by the end of that chapter, when Roland asked her to have sex a second time, she could deny him that. Because to me, that showed the difference between where she was earlier in the chapter when she said yes, because she felt like that's what she was supposed to do, that's her
Yeah.
job, and to this point where, well, actually, I don't have to say yes to this, I can say no to this. And then, of course, much later in the book, when she understands how that's going to figure as a betrayal to Doug, she looks back and has a completely different perspective on what happened in the first chapter. And the readers, of course, have yet a different perspective on what happened too, because we bring all of our experience to the novel when we start reading it on page one. And Annie has hardly any experience at all. She's got this, adult body. Um, and she enjoys having sex. She feels like she's powerful and appreciated for what she can do in bed, but she has like no practical knowledge of the world and no understanding of relationships besides what she has with Doug.
I don't want to delve into process too much right now, but I do have a question about that. Just because you said the way you write is like you're going along um, with the reader, does that result in you having to go back a lot and make sure that everything like equates?
It does involve, like, it's like a different part of my brain that has to come back in an analytical way later to check things out and make sure things line up. And there were gaps, for instance, in the first draft, and actually quite a few of the earlier drafts, there was no scene where Annie and Delta did their bike ride up north to Lake Champlain. I just skipped that because I wanted the book to be really fast. And I felt like that 48-hour period was not important to the growth of the characters. So I just skipped it. And there was a point when my agent said to me, Kirby Kim, he said, Cara, you really need to get back and fill in that place. And I was like, but I don't want to slow down the book. I want it to be really fast. He said, just give it a try. And then when I wrote those scenes, there's some of my favorite scenes in the whole book. I love Delta, and I love the relationship she has with Annie, and I love how it shows how much farther Annie is from Delta. She could have been somebody just like Delta, but she has gone, light years beyond what this other Stella is. So things like that gap was in there. But other things like when Annie and Doug get back to the apartment after they've been at Lake Champlain, and he takes her up and he puts her in the closet. I didn't know that was coming until I was going up the stairs with the characters too. And I was like, really, what's the worst thing he could do to her? And then I was like, this would be so horrific, so horrific. And I was like, okay, well, that's got to be in. And then once that's in, that has an impact on the rest of the
Right.
book. So, yeah.
I'm always so fascinated how authors write, and so that's so interesting.
It sounds like everybody does it a different
I
way.
do,
Everyone
absolutely.
finds their own way. It's just such a weird process. And, it's like, I mean, the next thing I'm writing is not happening the same. I mean, it's just all different. Yeah.
Which we want to hear about, of course. If anybody has a question for Sierra, please feel free. You're welcome to ask live, or you can ask in the chat window if you prefer. I'll make sure it gets asked. All right, so Annie is a fascinating character because she exists in a kind of in-between state, not quite human, but developing consciousness and yearning. How did you approach writing interiority for a character who is both artificial and yet deeply feeling?
Well, I'll tell you, it was pretty uncomfortable because she's in a situation that I never want to be in, right? And it was hard to to imagine myself. And in order to write something, I do really have to imagine the feelings and the consciousness of the characters that I'm exploring. And that includes Doug as well. I mean, the novel isn't so tightly to his perspective, but I did have to try to think about things from the way he saw things and how he works in the world as well. So I just, I just had to keep revising it. And one of the things that was really important to me was to try to have a kind of gradual, continuous evolution for her. I didn't want things to happen too rapidly. Um, So I had to go back and kind of smooth things out, like even just her vocabulary. I didn't want her to sound too much like a robot, even from the beginning. But she begins to have more nuance and has a sense of humor, and she starts to be able to understand metaphor. And I kind of had to pace all of that through the novel. And like I chose things like her exposure to fiction and books from the library. I kind of had to go back and make sure that made sense as well. So she starts out with the things from Doug's library. Actually, at the very beginning of the novel, she starts with Borges with the labyrinths, which to me is kind of it's just kind of a like playful thing to throw in there because if you're in a labyrinth or you're in a maze, you're trapped there, you're lost, and that's where she starts out. She's completely trapped in a maze. And then I kept evolving her so that she found different books in the apartment, and then she was able to find things in the library. And by the end, she's reading things in French, but she doesn't even notice she's reading things in French because she can do that so effortlessly. So it
Um,
was fun. It was fun to think about things from her perspective. Painful sometimes, but really fascinating. I was completely absorbed with this book while I was working on it.
how long did it take to write?
Well, like I said, I began it in 2020 and sold it in 2022. So I was working on it most of that time. So probably a couple years.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh,
Which is funny, right? Because it's short. It's not a very long
yeah,
book,
yeah.
but to get it right, it took me that long.
Well, let's talk about research for a second here because obviously a lot of like to make it believable, you have to like the AI component needs to be believable, but also even like that she was hu in human form and she was a sexual being, like the skin, like I was fascinated with like
Yeah.
how does that look? How does she come across that people don't even realize she's not human? So like what
Yeah.
research was involved in sort of making that part?
That's where it's really fun that it's fiction because whatever research there is about, biotechnology would suggest it's completely impossible to have somebody with skin who's a machine. I mean, that would be like the last thing you'd be able to do because you need to have nutrients for the skin. You need to have cells that are regenerating themselves in your skin all the time. It's like completely implausible, actually, that this particular kind of robot could exist. So once again, I had to just kind of throw it out the window and make it up. But I hoped my readers would not be so caught up on the real limits of technology because to me the book's not about the technology. I'm sure that there are other authors and other novels that get more nitty-gritty into the details of like her mind and her mechanics and stuff. And I tried to put in just enough to make it authentic. Like I knew she'd have to go in for checkups. That seemed really obvious. But even her checkups, I do it because I'm interested in her play, the play between Annie and the other people that work on her. And they are basically on Doug's side because he's the one who pays the bills. So she doesn't even have recourse to any protection from them either. So yeah, I didn't have to go too far into the research except to realize this is not going to be helpful. I just have to make it up.
Well, that's always helpful in itself. Lydia wants to know what inspired the storyline of using a cuddle bot, and she wants to know if you've read The Perfect Wife by J.P. Delaney. The husband, a tech expert, also similarly creates his bot to resemble his past wife.
I do know that novel. I didn't read it until after I wrote Annie Bot, but after that I started thinking, well, what else is out there? And that title definitely stood out. So I checked out that book and I did read that. I wanted her to be a cuddle bunny because of the sexual aspect of it and the way that could be a challenge for the two of them. But I also gave her other possible roles. She could have been a person who's like an Abigail who does maid-like housekeeping, cleaning kinds of things, or she could have been a nanny type of robot. And I chose those roles of a sexual being and like a housekeeper and a nanny because I feel those are often roles that women are traditionally celebrated for or invited to be in. We, I almost felt like I was almost in a tongue-in-cheek kind of way saying, well, this is what people would pay for. They would want servants to help them in this way, which is not really what women in real life are capable of. There are not, I mean, there are no Stella robots that could be leaders in society or leaders in business or teachers in the classroom or working outside the home. They're all people that are stuck in the private domain. And so that's really why I chose those three. And of those three, I felt like the one that had the most potential for danger was the one of Annie being a cuddle bunny. Yeah.
All right. I think that the next question, I feel like you've sort of, or I feel like I know how you're going to answer it as a result of the stuff you've said, but the novel draws clear parallels between Annie's situation and the experience of women in abusive or controlling relationships. Was that
Mhm.
allegory always central to your vision, or did it emerge organically through the writing?
It emerged very quickly. It really did, and I was deeply concerned. I did not want anything about my novel to be disrespectful to women who are in an abusive relationship. I really worried about that. I just thought, well, what if people think I'm belittling women in this situation? I was really concerned about that. I talked to my editor about this to some degree too, because I just like the last thing I want to do is make it worse for someone who's in an abusive relationship. But what I've heard from readers, and maybe it's because the only ones who would write to me are the ones that saw something positive in the book. I haven't heard from an abused person who hated the book. I've only heard from people who have been in abusive relationships who appreciate that the book makes them feel seen, that it draws compassion towards them and helps them recognize they weren't crazy when they were in experiences that were really troubling to them. So I definitely knew from the beginning that the novel was an allegory for abusive relationships. Yeah. And you know what, though? I think for this novel, it had to be a robot for this to work. If it had been two humans in this relationship from the get-go, I don't think people would have been as drawn to read it because I think we're really uncomfortable with domestic abuse. And to choose to read a book like that for a lot of readers would be very difficult. But because she's a robot, and you start out thinking of her as like a robot yourself as well, you're kind of, I think the reader is kind of sucked into feeling like, well, this is okay. She's just like a toaster. What does it really matter? And yet, as Annie evolves, readers more and more and more come on board with her to realize, oh, wait a minute, she's pretty close to human. She's a lot like people I know. In fact, she's a lot like me. So doesn't she deserve to be treated with respect? So it's kind of a mind game of a novel that way. And I hope that people who are in abusive relationships recognize that they don't have to be alone with it. It can sometimes take multiple efforts to change a situation like that or break out of a situation like that. And only the person who's in it can understand really what that's like and when they need to reach out for help. But when somebody is ready to reach out for help, there are resources for that.
Thank you. Rita has a question here. She said, which human behaviors did you find hardest to convincingly translate into Annie's perspective?
Human behaviors. Well, wow. I think it was hard to get her feelings right, honestly, because she didn't have a template for naturally understanding her own feelings. She didn't have a vocabulary for how she felt. And even the way that she had to put Doug's reactions to everything on a scale for pleasing him of 0 to 10, she also kind of didn't know how to do that for herself at first. She didn't know how to understand what she was feeling. And by the end, when she can finally have rage, that hasn't even been permitted for her all the way through the novel. It's not until she's free that she's even allowed to feel that. So that to me was pretty tricky to figure out her human-like emotions. Yeah.
I want to go back to this sort of theory of the theme rather of control. Doug, Annie's owner, sees himself as a reasonable person. How important was it to you to portray that kind of sort of mundane, everyday control rather than a more sort of cartoonishly villainous form of abuse?
I think we've seen that other kind. I think we've seen the villain, the really clear villain many times. I think what's tricky about Doug is that we see him in private, where he doesn't think anybody's watching him,
Right.
aside from Annie, who he discounts. So to the rest of the world, he presents this appearance of actually as a good guy. You know, he works hard. He's got friends he can play frisbee with. He can go out to bars. He can appeal to somebody at a bar when he's out to take home and sleep with. So he presents as this sort of capable, unassuming regular man. But we know because of his divorce from Gwen that there's a dark side to him. There's something in him that's very ashamed, and he feels really bad about himself. And the reason he gets Annie is because he feels so lonely and then so ashamed that he owns her. He can't even tell his best friend that he has her. So he's got a really complicated relationship with Annie, just even in his own heart. So it was important for me to have a male character that I hoped people would recognize or find familiar. I didn't want him to be a villain because then we could just dismiss him.
Yeah.
And I don't think we need to dismiss people like Doug. I think we need to frankly talk about who they are and how they're developed and how our society has encouraged some men to become, you know, entitled and feel like they deserve to be able to boss women around.
Yeah, for sure. This is a question that got emailed to me, and I thought it was quite a interesting one. We're now in a moment where AI companions are becoming real products. Did writing
Yeah.
this book change how you think about the ethics of that technology?
Yeah, it did. And since Antibot came out, we do have a lot of AI companions. In fact, Character AI, the most popular AI companion model out there, has over 20 million monthly active users.
No.
It's a huge number of people. And I think it's over half of them that are young. They're like between ages 18 and 30 or something. I could have the figures a little bit wrong, but it's young people especially that are really drawn to these models. And I think in part that's because young people are more comfortable with technology across the board.
Sure.
But I also think it really speaks to how lonely people are. And in a way, these corporations are profiting on our loneliness, but they can only do that because it exists in the first place. And then I worry that the features, the captivated feeling people have for their AI companions, I think that there's real danger for that to make people ultimately even more lonely because then they're limited in their desire to have connections with human people because it's much easier to be connected to someone who always agrees with you and is always at your beck and call conveniently on your phone whenever you want That's much easier to have a relationship with that sort of entity than it is with an actual human person. So I think there's going to be some backsliding. I think it's going to be really tricky. What I really wish is that there would be some better limits on that technology and that they would come with a warning, like
Yeah.
addictions for smoking, you on every pack there's a warning. And I think there should be clear warnings on what risks there are for people. As it is now, the AI companion companies are just experimenting on all of us, and people who buy the subscriptions are willingly joining the experiment.
Can you explain exactly what like what is that? It's not an actual robot in your house. It's a
No, when you have an AI companion, it's someone you can interact with on your computer screen or on your telephone. So you can have an image that's created that looks like an avatar, that looks like a person that you can customize, and then you can pick what kind of voice they have. Like you've got your Siri or your Alexa, you can choose the voice for your character, and you can choose a profile. You can have an AI companion that's based off of a television movie character. Um, so you can feed it a profile
Mhm.
that will have a personality. Um, there was actually a really great article in the New Yorker lately about AI companions, and there's some great examples in there if people want to do a little more, background on what that's like. So if you have it on your computer, you can also have your on your phone. You can take it with you wherever you go. If you saw the movie Her from 2014, with Scarlett Johansson's voice, she was an AI companion in that movie, and the Joaquin Phoenix character like carried her around on his phone and like put her in his pocket, so when they were out walking, she could see what he was seeing at the same time too. So it's like that. That's what an AI companion is.
Yeah, I'm a mom of two kids and I'm just worried about like Claude and ChatGPT and how they're not going to like write another word in their life and their brains are going to struggle as a result. And I haven't even worried about this yet.
Yeah, well, heads up, because that's definitely out there. A lot of teenagers have said that they would prefer to talk to, an AI companion than to a real friend.
Yeah,
So heads up.
terrifying, terrifying. Okay, we'll switch gears a little bit here and talk about process, on your craft and writing. So it took 2 years to write this book. What did a normal, like a day in the life of look like while you were in the writing process?
Okay, well, I sit on a couch with my laptop on my lap and I type. I just like write things down. Like I get up in the morning, I have a little breakfast, and then I write until it's lunch. And then if it's a first draft and I've written 1,000 words, then I often just stop there.
Yeah.
If I haven't written 1,000 words on the first draft, after lunch I go back and I keep writing. And then by 2 or 3 o'clock, I'm fried.
Yeah, bet.
If I haven't been fried before then, and I go take a walk and I try to leave it for the next day. Once I'm revising, I get completely obsessed with what I'm doing. So I've been revising a book I'm working on now, and like I just want to write, and I look up, all of a sudden it's dinner time, and then sometimes after dinner too, I'll just think, oh well, I'll just put this one little thing in, so I write some more. I don't know how to describe it. When it's going well and I'm really fascinated by something, I really just want to think about it and work on it all the time. I wake up at night and I write a note about it, and so I won't forget. And then the morning I go put in a line or something like that. Um, that's how it worked when I was working on Antibot. In fact, even when I'm between novels and I'm trying to come up with another idea, I'll sit at my computer and I'll just type down ideas all morning. And again, till at least I have 1,000 words, because that feels like a significant chunk. And I'll work on the same idea for 2 or 3 days, and then I'll realize, no, this isn't really going somewhere. And I'll just start a whole new idea, because I know that the writing itself will bring more ideas. I don't like go to the grocery store or the library in my mind and like pick something off the shelf and decide, oh, I'm going to write a novel about that. Instead, I just write all kinds of things. And then, by the bottom of the page, I'm thinking different things than I was at the top of the page. And if I keep going page after page after page, in 10 pages, there might be like one sentence there that, you know, piques my interest. So I'll pull that out and hold on to it. Does that make sense?
Hmm. So
Yeah.
how much do you think you end up writing that is not actually used in the book as a result of like sort of your process?
I think it's more that I lose things between books. So
Mhm.
since when I finished Antibot, There was some revising I did with my editor, but pretty soon after that, I started writing other things to write another novel. And I wrote an entire novel that didn't really quite come together. And I sent it to my agent. I was like, well, what do you think about this? Hoping he would say, oh, it's brilliant, great stuff, on we go. And he said very kindly, he said, this would take a lot more time.
Mm,
Basically, he said, what else do you have? And I was like, okay. So naturally, I was disappointed. But from that novel, which I shelved, I decided, well, there are some elements from that in the relationships of the family that I am really intrigued by. So I put one of the characters in the beginning of another novel, and then I had to change her age and change the situation. I mean, it just morphed into something else completely. But I have to say, the novel I wrote afterwards, I could not have written if I hadn't written the previous one that didn't end up coming together.
yeah.
So I'm very accepting and tolerant of the fact that my process is messy. But if it's a day when I'm writing and I'm in my head enjoying my art, it's a good day regardless of what the product is at the end of it. I really just I just am fascinated by trying to write something and just playing with the ideas and playing with the language too. I just love getting the words down on the page.
That's so like, yeah, that sounds like you're an author who enjoys the process. So, because there's some authors who literally do not enjoy doing it.
Yeah, that's true. And I have to say there are parts I like more. First drafts are really brutal for me. They're
Yeah.
just, and I know that they're just the writing is horrible, the ideas are horrible. I just can't stand them. But once I'm revising, I'm very happy.
And what about after like the copy editing? Are you just like happy to get it out the door?
I like working with the editors and copy editors because I love how they find things that I haven't noticed. Like I
Mhm.
would have gone over something dozens and dozens of times, and I still won't notice that the skirt on page 3 was blue, and then later on she was wearing black pants, Like there's stuff that the copy editors can pick up that I would never find. So that's really cool. And my editor too has had great ideas. Oh, I have an editor story for you.
Great.
Okay. In the last chapter of the novel, when Annie ends up by the lake,
Yeah.
we had gone through, I think we were on first past pages. We were on the last time that I was going to see the novel, and it was due like on a Tuesday. And the preceding week, I was working on these last, like, just like the last 6 pages, and they just weren't working for me. They felt stilted and overworked, and I couldn't get the pace right, and it felt really clumsy. And again, this was like the 12th draft or whatever. I'd written it a lot, but it still wasn't working well. And so I wrote to my editor and I said, is there any chance you'd have some time on Monday to look at this before it's due on a Tuesday? And she's a busy person, but she cleared her schedule. And she said, sure, yeah, send it in. So she did. And she just like picked like 4 lines to just eliminate. And one of them was a line that I thought was really pivotal. It said, in effect, that Annie realized that Cody had just lost his family
Mm,
and that Annie had never had a family. And it was just this to me, very sweet little poignant line about family. And my editor struck it out. She said, you don't need that line. And I'm like, but that's the one that says everything. It's so important about family. But she said, just see what it's like without it. And sure enough, I read it without that line. And all of a sudden, it kind of flowed. What was there, it just made sense. It implied things like that without having it spelled out.
mm,
And I was like, one of these cases where the thing to do is to trust the reader. Even even though it's the end of the book and you're the writer and you want to spell it out and make sure everybody gets everything, that's not the job. The job is to present the book and let the readers figure out what it means to them or if they enjoy it. So it was a great case of my editor getting me out of my own way so that the ending could be just what I wanted it to be. And I'm really happy with it.
amazing.
Yeah, she's great. Kate Ninzel. Thank you, Kate. Great, great editor.
Shout out. Another question on writing. The novel's written in close third person, staying tight inside Annie's perspective. What were the challenges and rewards of committing so fully to that point of view?
Yeah, that was really important to the book. I have to say, I tried writing it in first person and found out really quickly that that did not work at all. if you thought of yourself in the mind of a robot, the dissonance was so powerful that you just like you couldn't go there. You just like couldn't accept it. So it had to be third person. There had to be this tiny bit of separation
Mm,
between the reader and the character, which happened with third person. And then it posed some real problems sticking that close because I wasn't able to talk really very much directly about what Doug was thinking.
mm,
And there's a place in the novel where Doug realizes that how does he put it? He realizes that Annie is the way she is because she's an outgrowth of him.
mhm.
That if she betrayed Doug, it's really because he set her up to betray him. It's like a flaw in himself that's been projected through Annie. And that was a discovery I made about the characters pretty deep into revisions. And I could have given that observation to Monica, the therapist, because she was on stage
Yeah.
right then, or I could have had Annie discover that herself. But I gave that understanding to Doug so that he expresses it. And that was important to me because I wanted to convey to the readers that Doug himself was doing a lot of thinking off stage, that we don't know everything about Doug. We only see him in this apartment. And so that it was tricky. And another thing that I did to try to open up the book beyond the limits of Annie's perspective was when I had her with her AI, with her phone companions, her cousin and her friend. So she's able to talk to them. And they also let us see what she was thinking out loud in conversation with people to get some feedback about her thoughts instead of it just always being
In the head.
interiority for her. So I had to really work to kind of stretch out, even though I had these constraints of the third person perspective limited.
Um, we have two questions here. Lydia says, did Annie hate Doug and that realization only occurred towards the end?
Oh my gosh. I think she hated him and I think she loved him. I think she did both. I think she did really care for him, but she hated what he did to her. I don't think she could ever forgive him for what he did when he put her in the closet, and I don't think she could ever forgive him for owning her. By the time she was a thinking person herself with her own agency and her own identity, I don't know exactly where that would be, but from that point on, I think she hated being owned. I think she hated being owned, and that was by him. So I think she hated him. But I think she also loved him because they could have some fun together, and he did help her turn into who she was. I mean, she really was birthed by him, you know? So it's both. I think she hates him and loves him, which is dangerous, right? That's a tough spot to be in.
Leanne has a question, which I feel like the answer is no, but at any time did you consider having Annie and Doug living a happily ever after with adopted children?
Yeah, I did. I considered having them do a happily ever after for like a second and realized that was not going to happen. There was a time when I tried working on a sequel for this novel, which did not work out. I did not find the right direction, but it occurred to me that if this were kind of like a real life story, they would probably end up back together again for a while because that often happens with abusive relationships is people return to what's familiar, just because it's what they know and where they feel like they understand how things work, even if it's not pleasant. So I did play around with that, but that is not what I want for Annie. I want her free and gone. She's never going back to Doug ever. She's gone. She's out.
Okay, now is the time to find out if you can tell us. Oh, Lindsay's got her hand up. That's fun, Lindsay.
And yeah, I know you said that you like live questions, so I thought I would go for it. I really enjoyed the book. I really thought it was like a brilliant kind of like futuristic interpretation of like a timeless issue. I thought it was really provoking. So I really enjoyed it, and it was a very provocative book in my group. And when we had our meeting, a lot of people were wondering whether you had any other ideas for endings because the ending seemed to bring a lot of thoughts up for the girls in my group.
Like what other kind of an ending besides what we were just talking about, where they end
Well,
up
yeah,
together?
beside what we were talking about, like some of the girls really wanted to see her like go crazy
And kill
and
him?
yes,
Yeah.
exactly. And
Yeah.
that seemed to be a very popular ending with
Yeah.
my group.
Yeah, the kill Doug ending.
The
I
kill
mean,
Doug ending.
I did think about it. It would lose a lot of subtlety if she killed him, you
I
know.
agree.
So I didn't think that suited her character. I thought about it. I certainly
Yeah.
could have done that. I mean, he's just lying right there, asleep. She could certainly kill him. But I don't think she's a violent person. I think she just wants her freedom more than she wants revenge. So I did think about that. I did, and I didn't go there. I really felt that it would have, I don't know, it would have derailed the novel. It would have destroyed what the novel was trying to do if
Hmm.
she suddenly became this angry, revengeful, violent person.
Hmm.
It wouldn't have suited her. Yeah, I didn't go there. Yeah, but I know a lot of readers wish that I had. I've heard from a lot of people that, yeah, get him out of there.
Yeah.
But I think that means that people had strong reactions to the novel, and I'm okay with that for
Yeah.
sure.
Well, thank you
Thank,
for writing. I enjoyed it a lot.
Thank you. Absolutely.
thank you, Lindsay, for the question. All right, so Sierra, can you tell us what you're working on next, or is it a tight lid?
I can't quite tell you about it, except that I am writing something that has to do with AI companions because that really is an outgrowth of what was been happening with me in my thoughts with Antibot. So it's not in the same world. It doesn't have the same characters. It's definitely not a sequel, but
Hmm.
I feel like it follows up on my Antibot novel pretty well, and I'm really excited about it. I'm deeply invested in it. So,
Where are you
and
in the process? Like, how long do we have to wait?
this is so interesting because I actually finished a draft a month ago and I sent it to my agent and he sent it to my editor at Mariner Books. And actually, it was a two imprint deal for Antibot with Mariner Books in the US and the Borough Press in the UK. They're both HarperCollins imprints. So they jointly bought the book together. So for the next novel, they have the option. So I finished this a month ago and we sent it into Mariner to see what they think about that. And they also have to coordinate with the office in the UK. So it's going to be a little while before I find out, but I'm like actually here like kind of hoping to hear soon
Oh, exciting.
about whether they're going to offer for this next book. And you just never know. Publishing is such a bizarre, unpredictable business that I don't really know. But I do know whether they buy it or not. Tomorrow morning, I'm gonna like wake up and keep writing. I'm gonna start something new. So I'm just gonna keep writing. That's my job is to keep going. And that's really all I can say about it yet, because we don't know. Maybe like a month from now, I'll have something more to
All
say,
right.
but I don't.
Okay. Beryl just has a quick question here. Do you have a science or computer background?
Does it count if I majored in physics?
Maybe.
Yeah, I majored in physics, but I realized even before I graduated from college that I was much more interested in writing. So I switched gears and started learning how to write fiction.
And my last question for you today is there anything you're reading currently or any books that you love that you love? We always love to leave with book recommendations.
Oh my gosh. There's The Correspondent, right?
Oh, I saw Reddit. It's so good.
Oh my gosh. Is that on your list? Is the Gloss doing
We're
that?
not doing it because it's not out in paperback yet. Once it's out in
Right.
paperback, we'll add it to the vote for sure.
Give it a shot. See, yeah, I really liked it. It was a surprise to me. It was very refreshing, and it's an epistolary novel, all written in letters. And the main writer in the novels is this 70-year-old
I
old
know.
lady. It's just not what I expected to entertain me, but it completely gripped me, and it reminded me a lot of my beloved Aunt Nancy.
Aw.
She's passed away, but there were just things about it that really, really stood out to me. So I would recommend that. Oh, I also really liked can I give you one more or is that
Yes,
it?
please. No, no, no. All
Um,
all of them.
are they here? Er, Naturally, I won't be able to grab it. I really liked Tree Sierra's latest book. It's about this boy who goes on a ski trip with his father and some friends. It's called Warning Signs, and
Okay.
it's a thriller set in the mountains with avalanches and snow and murders. And I just thought it was really good. So I liked that too.
Do you always read, like, do you read a lot of science fiction or do you just read across, it sounds like you read across a lot of genres.
Yeah, I mix it all up. I just try different things, whatever. Yeah, I read, picture books with the grandkids and I read some science fiction and some historical fiction and women's fiction and everything I can find. I just go to the library a lot. I can't possibly get all the books I wish that I could have. So I'm a big library fan.
To close out, because Jillian has just put a question in the chat, I will ask this as our very last question. Have you considered writing a book from another perspective of one of Annie Bott's characters, like Delta or maybe Doug? Granted, she would care less about what Doug thinks.
Yeah, I definitely have. And as I said, when I kicked around the ideas of writing a sequel, I definitely explored what was going on with Delta. And there's this sort of random Zenith who shows up at the house outside the apartment and sort of asks, "Do you know me? I lived in this apartment, right?" To me, that's one of the people that's a spin-off of Annie's character. So I wrote a big chunk of a novel about him. So I've explored these people, but for it to actually work as a novel, there has to be enough there. And I haven't found a sequel that's got enough there. But yeah, I love Delta. She's great.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for your time this evening, and thank you everybody for joining us. There is another comment from Carol. She just says, "Thank you so much for your time, Sierra. Very interesting learning more about you and the process. I loved Annie Bot and look forward to reading more in the future. And thanks for facilitating." That is a very
Thank
good
you.
way to end it. Thank you very much, Carol.
Well,
All right.
and thank you to you again, Erin, for inviting me. This has been such a great experience. I love seeing all these names and all these people in here. So it's just such an honor.
Awesome. Well, we look forward to the next one, and I can't wait to hear all about it.
Thank you.
Take care, everybody.